All right. Well, we'd like to get your opinion on something related to moving to the Western Conference, the San Jose Sharks. In the first round, when it started, the Sharks looked like this may have been the playoff choke creeping up on them. Then they turned it around and were able to knock off Colorado. Then they took a 3-0 lead on Detroit, as you know, and then got pounded in Game 4 by a score of, what was it, like
7-1.
Yeah, it was 7-1. Based on what you saw in Game 4, do you think this was like maybe just a blip on the screen for the Sharks and they're legitimate playoff contenders for a shot at the Cup? Or do you think this could be like San Jose's choke rearing its head again?
Yeah, great point. Nothing this time of year in the playoffs is just a blip on the screen for the San Jose Sharks when they get spanked like that. The question with the Sharks is never can they do it in the regular season, because they're perennially a great regular season team. But the jury starts deliberating on them when the playoffs start. And without a doubt, if they don't have a lump in their throats right now, there's probably something wrong with them, because the skeletons in their closets, that disease called the choke disease, that the inability to face adversity disease, you lose a game like that, all of a sudden that disease is back and you thought it was in complete remission. If you lose another game, if you lose a Game 5, then all of a sudden it's grown exponentially and the disease is alive and well. Mm-hmm. So there are a couple of things to watch in this series. Number one is the sheer brilliance of the Red Wings when they all apply themselves, and that involves Jimmy Howard. He's got a hold here because Jimmy Howard is sort of ridden a roller coaster in the playoffs. Yeah. But the brilliance of Detroit combined with the memories that the Sharks have, the guys that have been there for enough years, and there are a bunch of them, and there are core players, Joe Thornton and Patrick Marleau, the memories of their past failures and understanding that the whole world is watching them saying, are they going to choke again, or are they going to get this done? So it'll be really interesting to see what happens, and I really believe that there are 3 games left in this series starting tonight, right? They've played 4.
Yeah.
I don't think the Sharks have 3 games to win 1. I think the Sharks have 2 games to win 1. Yep. Right. Because if this series ever gets to a Game 7 in the Shark Tank, I don't care where it's played, you got to like Detroit if it gets to a Game 7.
Just like with Phoenix.
Yeah, I mean, well, even more so. Phoenix was playing with house money. Nobody expected them to do anything. Detroit flexed. Their big players, Datsuk, Zetterberg, and Lidstrom, really flexed their muscles in Game 7 in Phoenix. So Phoenix was playing with house money and not feeling any pressure. The pressure on San Jose will be crushing.
All right, and before we go on to the last prediction, just a side question for you. Obviously, you played in the NHL, like we said earlier, and you then transitioned into doing color commentary primarily on ESPN with Gary Thorne.
Yep.
What was the biggest transition going from actually being on the ice and playing as a center and then going up into the broadcast booth?
Well, I was a full-time actor for 3 years, too, so there was almost a bigger transition there. And the transition from playing to acting was when you'd go into an audition, figuring out what the hell to do with your adrenaline. I mean, in hockey, you'd go out and just, get a couple of hits, skate as hard as you can, come back to the bench completely out of breath, and a lot of that edge of the adrenaline would be cut off. Right. So that was the big transition there, was managing my own emotions. Once I got into the booth, I think the biggest transition, it wasn't what information to use, because by nature I'm kind of organized and I, plan and I prepare for almost everything that I do, so I know how to prepare. It was actually seeing the game from the perspective of the press box up high compared to what it was like sitting on the bench. And I remember early in my broadcast career saying, man, I wish I could really broadcast from the bench, because I see the game, I think, better, and I see it differently, and I see it well. So that was the biggest. It was actually the optical perspective difference of doing it, on the side of the ice surface on the bench compared to, and in some rinks, like the old Montreal Forum, and even currently the Bell Center in Montreal, you're hanging from a perch that's almost over the ice. And that was really strange. So that perspective was different. The other thing was not having a sense of the emotion and what was really going on from that far away, because you really have a feel for the game when you're playing in it and you're sitting on the bench, which I did spend a bit of time doing towards the end of my career. So that was probably the biggest transition.
One last question regarding your broadcasting. Do you see in the near future any time the NHL possibly return to ESPN? Because I personally miss hearing you and Gary Thorne call games. I don't know if you'd get back involved with that again, but do you see that happening?
Well, I would certainly volunteer to get back involved with it again if it happened. I loved Versus too and didn't want to leave Versus. It was Versus that decided to make a change and go in a different direction. You know what? There are so many people that would like it to happen, but the terms have to be right. The NHL knew it was. Gary Bettman knew what he was doing. The NHL was a very small fish in a very large pond at ESPN. Versus came along and said, not only are we going to give you more money than ESPN's willing to give you, but we're going to make you the biggest fish in our little pond, and we're going to try to grow the shores and the size of the pond. And Versus has done a pretty darn good job doing that. I think there's actually room. I think ESPN and Versus and NBC could probably share the NHL, but the terms would have to be right. And you know what? If ESPN wants it badly enough, and the NHL wants ESPN badly enough, it'll happen. Right now, the ratings are good and continue to rise on NBC, good and continue to rise on Versus. So the NHL is kind of holding the cards here, I think. They don't have to panic and say, gosh, we need you. We're hitting a dead end here. They have to just come to terms and come up with an agreement that both sides could live with. And I'm hoping that it happens, and I really believe that within the next couple of years it will happen.
All right, one final question before we let you get out of here. Out of all the teams that are currently left in the playoffs, prediction right now, who's playing for the Stanley Cup and who walks away with the most storied prize in all of hockey?
I think it will be the Pittsburgh Penguins and the Chicago Blackhawks. And I think the Chicago Blackhawks will win the Stanley Cup.
You think the curse of Marian Hossa will end?
Yeah, what about that, huh?
And
that'll be his third consecutive trip to the finals with his third different team.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, at some point the guy's got to hit the lottery, doesn't he?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, very true. And not only that, but it'll break if my math is right, a 49-year drought for the Blackhawks because they have not won a Stanley Cup since 1961.
You're absolutely right. Yeah.
He knows his history.
Yep. You're talking to the hockey encyclopedia, but that's another story for another day. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, that was Bill Clement. Mr. Clement, we thank you very much for the time.
Hey, my pleasure. We'll do it again if you guys want.
Yeah, definitely.
Sure.
Thank you very much, Bill.
Take it
See
easy.
you guys.
Bye.